Hello, everyone. My name is Gitika Gorthi, and today I'm very excited to be interviewing a very special space champion who I've been talking to for quite a few months, and we finally arranged a time to talk today, Miss Ruvimbo Samanga. Miss Samanga is a space lawyer and a policy analyst and researcher. She seeks to collaborate on space-related capacity building research for the African and the global space sector. She has a deep appreciation for the creative arts and how it brings inspiration to education, business, and leadership. On top of that, Ms. Samanga is devoted to community engagement and making meaningful relationships with others. She explores her curious passions and talents through the space industry and its intersectionalities with trade, investment, human rights, and the social sciences. I read about Miss Samanga's great work all on LinkedIn, and I'm so inspired by her journey so far. And she's very young and all that she's already accomplished. And I'm incredibly excited to hear Miss Samanga's journey to where she is today, as well as her future goals. So welcome, Miss Samanga. Thank you so much for taking your time to inspire the next generation of aerospace leaders.
Thank you, Gitika, and thank you so much as well for the platform that you've given us. As I just mentioned to you a couple of minutes ago, our work in the industry is only made so important by organizations such as yours that help to spread awareness and help to engage citizens on how they can not only contribute, but also benefit from this growing industry. So thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. And, I'm just so curious on what you do on a day-to-day basis, because I noticed you're involved in so many different nonprofit work, as well as being a space lawyer and a student. So could you share a little bit more about your, typical day? How does your day usually run?
Oh, wow. So I'm a bit of an early bird. I like to wake up early from anywhere between 3 o'clock to 6 a.m. in the morning is when I'm up, and I take advantage of that quiet time to do a lot of reading. And people in the legal profession will tell you that law is really just about reading, as much as I can put it simply. And I use that time to read. And then perhaps for the rest of the day, I sort of split my day up into quarters. So I have 2 morning sessions and 2 afternoon sessions. And I devote that to research as well. Or for instance, in the afternoon is when I usually take part in my outreach projects, when everyone is fully awake and up and about. And then I reserve my evenings for meetings, such as right now, it's my evening, perhaps your morning as well. So my day is pretty routine, day in, day out. I find that it sort of breaks the monotony of being in the legal profession, and it gives me a lot of structure since I work as a freelancer. But as you correctly mentioned, I do quite a bit. So it's nice having such a segmented day because I can give equal time to each and every single one of it. But for the most part, I'm a lawyer, so reading, researching, and analyzing is pretty much what I do from a day to day. Yeah.
Wow. And I'm so glad you're able to make time for all of the activities you do. Being a lawyer is definitely not easy. And I guess as a freelancer, it's even more difficult. So, thank you for all that you're doing for the space industry and inspiring so many students in Africa and other countries as well. And, I'm just curious, you mentioned a lot about space law. And whenever I talk to students about the aerospace industry, they always hear the terms engineer and scientist. But I think law sometimes gets stuck behind where you don't realize you need space lawyers in the industry. So could you share a little bit more about what it means to be a space lawyer and a policy analyst in the aerospace industry, and why it's important in the space economy?
Thank you so much for that question. I may have oversimplified it a little and isolated it to just reading, but it's so much more than that. I feel that as a space policy analyst or a space lawyer, you're essentially interpreting law and policy in a way to not only give certainty to different stakeholders, but also give them an equal footing or playground for them to equally benefit from all of the benefits that we have in outer space. And just to give a little distinction, there are space lawyers who work more on the regulatory side, that is working practically with stakeholders to not only abide by regulations, but to also form regulations that can manage different stakeholders. And then we have policy, which is more forming stances or forming legal thoughts around different issues. And you can operate synonymously between the two of them, or you can either be one or of either of them. I like to operate on both spheres. I think it gives you fair advantage to sort of support stakeholders better when you understand both the law and the policy. But I suppose on the second question, why this is particularly important is that we are dealing with what we call a global commons, which is an area that we all share. So to that extent, it's important not only to manage interests, but to ensure that with all of these different stakeholders, we all benefit the same, but we also sustain the environment. And you will find that space sustainability is becoming one of the core challenges of our time. So having the law and the policy brings about a standard of uniformity that helps us all coordinate together. And for this reason, I really like to say that the legal profession, especially in the aerospace industry, is often underlooked. But I think that it has a great role to play in fostering synergies between different stakeholders and allowing us to use this space in a mutually beneficial way.
Wow, that was beautifully said. I can definitely see why you're a lawyer. I think those words were just put together so harmoniously. And I definitely what you were saying about the importance of space law, especially as we're looking to going back on the moon, going to Mars, it's going to take a team effort. International cooperation. It's going to take a lot of, rules set beforehand of what is going to happen when we get to these places and who does it belong to or what's going to happen to this land. So I think space law is starting to come into the front of the scene and starting to show its relevance and really trying to figure out how are we going to take the next steps as a civilization. So really, a space law is so exciting. And I'm curious from your experiences so far as a space lawyer, two questions. What is the best or most interesting experience you've had being a space lawyer, whether it be you created a policy, you created a legislation, and also what makes you excited for space law in the future? Because I feel like as we go to Mars, there's going to be so many different policies that are being made around space junk or space mining, for example. What are your thoughts on what have you done and what are you looking forward to?
Wow, I've had so many diverse experiences, but I think the one that certainly stands out for me was my research fellowship with the Open Lunar Foundation, where I got to work on lunar development policy with an African twist. And I'm always keen on bringing the African space industry to the fore of global discussions. And I was just so in awe of not only the creative space I was in, but the support and partnerships I received during the time. And I was able to talk on a topic that is still developing, but is so exciting, and that is space mining. And we've begun to get figures that point to it being $1 trillion industry within the next few decades. So not only are we looking at a huge resource benefit, but we're also looking at something that could potentially have geopolitical tensions as well. So it's an exciting space to look at when you think that, there's so much resources, not just on our Earth, but beyond. And I'll just give a random fact here. Did you know that there's enough helium-3, which is a gas known for supporting energy and other energy products? There's enough helium-3 on the moon to support the whole world for the next 50 years. And that's just helium-3 alone. There are other rare earth metals and gases and elements that we can extract not only for development or in situ development on the moon, but also for development here back on Earth if it's to develop that far. But without repeating space mining as an exciting terrain to look forward to, I also look forward to space tourism, not only as a way of inspiring hope amongst people, but I think also to tackle some of humanity's challenges when it comes to perhaps even transportation or developing technology off Earth. I suppose that having greater spaceflight systems will not only make it easier to transport the resources that we need off Earth, but could also take more people off Earth to learn how to live in extreme environments, to teach us what it's all about, and perhaps bring that knowledge back home, especially to us climate vulnerable regions that need that kind of research and development. So that is certainly, or I'd say those are certainly two areas I look forward to seeing grow in the next few decades, and perhaps not even beyond the next 40 years, they'll probably be fully fledged.
Yeah, and you mentioned two really great points, especially about the space tourism, but also space for Earth. With space mining, the resources we'll find, but also the research that'll take place in these extreme environments, and bringing back that research to help us on Earth is just so exciting. I'm interested in space medicine, as I mentioned to you, and just the medicine or the telemedicine we will develop, the technology we will develop for astronauts to travel to deep outer space can be brought back to make healthcare more accessible down here on Earth. And I think, making healthcare accessible, making tools accessible people, making just healthcare in general something that everyone should have access to is so important, something I'm passionate about, that space can be a tool to get to. And I think you mentioned that exact same point with space mining, space exploration, how all of those can come back to help us on Earth and help humanity as a whole kind of move forward and progress. So I think that's really a great point. And you mentioned something about space tourism, and that kind of leads to my next question. Sarah Savory, she's someone who I actually interviewed a year back on this channel, and she was the first Egyptian woman to go to space, or first Egyptian to go to space, and she's a woman. And she went on the recent Blue Origin flight, and she was just in tears after her last flight. I'm so proud of her. But, she's from Africa, and I've interviewed a few space scouts from Africa, and specifically Zimbabwe as well, who are incredibly passionate about space. And a lot of time when I hear those students, the biggest concern for them is by geographic location. They always feel that, they lack the opportunities, which is true. They lack some of the opportunities that maybe other cities, or, where the European Space Agency or the NASA, or, being in the US provides a lot more opportunities than some of the other countries, such as India, Australia, or Africa, the continent Africa. So I'm curious, from your experience, you're from Zimbabwe, how did you kind of navigate being in a region like that to go and become a space lawyer for Africans? And, how would you recommend other students to be able to kind of not necessarily follow your path, but advice you would give them if they're also from a geographic location that's not very space bound, or has a space company or a space organization? What advice would you give them?
Well, it certainly hasn't been easy. And I think this would resonate with many other people from not only developing countries, but emerging space nations as well. I personally didn't have the benefit of studying space law within my jurisdiction. In fact, I studied law outside of Zimbabwe. I studied in South Africa. And even then, I still didn't study space law, although it was available to me. But for that lack of awareness, I only then encountered it in other avenues. So it has been fairly difficult, not only in terms of getting the requisite skills, to be able to compete in the field, but also your self-confidence can get hindered a little bit, because you inevitably come across people with a much, robust CV than yourself, and you start to feel like an imposter in the role that you're playing. And I think even more so than that, it's also difficult to then find application within your home country, because if there's not a strong research and development base, likely there won't be a strong technological and innovation base as a result. So applying those skills back home becomes quite difficult in and of itself. So the only thing I can encourage people to do, I suppose, is to, first of all, think outside of the four corners of your community and allow yourself the growth and the ability to aspire to be something else, even if it's not necessarily in your immediate sphere of reference. And how you can do this is by networking with other people, by using whatever resources or means you have to tap into the worldwide databases that we have now. And information is flowing around much freer than it was perhaps a generation ago. And I think as well, just allowing yourself to get out of your comfort zone, because, it's called your comfort zone for a reason, and you want to stay there, you want to feel safe, but change is necessary and it's important. And unfortunately, growing does hurt, which is why they call it growing pains. But really, the most beautiful metamorphosis comes from allowing yourself to experience new things. So there's so many different avenues and organizations springing up that will allow you to tap into this. And I mean, if I could do it, you certainly could do it as well. And you really can learn along the way. And as you learn, you also gain access to more opportunities. You can study, you can work, you can build or support your personal development in so many different ways. And don't deny yourself that opportunity of trying, at least.
Wow, that is incredibly inspiring. Both my parents are first-generation immigrants from India. And so for them also, growing up, space was not like, even though there is ISRO, there wasn't a lot of space presence around the country, especially they grew up in like a very rural place in India in the South. And so for them, it was definitely kind of a shocker when I was like, I have a rocketry club in my middle school. They were like, Wow, you do? I've never even built a rocket in my whole life, and not even a small one. So I can definitely see how, trying to find those opportunities and navigating them is so difficult, especially in a place where that's not a big thing. You don't talk about space in classrooms, and teachers are not even confident enough to speak about rocketry. They think, oh, I'm not experienced in math, or I'm not experienced in rocket science. I can't talk about this. And so just the resources, the availability, and the access to the space industry is still very, very limited, which kind of scares me as we're trying to expand the aerospace sector, which is why I'm very passionate about making education in aerospace accessible to all students. And so, your journey is so inspiring for me. And I'm curious, how did you discover your passion for space? Like, what was the aha moment where you were like, I'm going to go into the space industry? And how did you discover the intersection between space and policy? I'm really curious to hear about your specific journey.
It was quite fortuitous. I never would have thought I'd be here. I mean, I'd always considered I wanted a career that was international, that was creative, novel, engaging, but I didn't quite know how I would get there. But thankfully enough, I took part in a moot court competition, which is called the Manfred Lax Space Law Moot Court. And it's organized by the International Institute for Space Law every year during, there's some rounds leading up to the IAC, and then the finals are at the IAC. So I was fortunate enough to take part in that competition as part of my university team at the University of Pretoria, and we managed to make it to the World Finals in 2017, but unfortunately we lost out in the semifinals. But perhaps that was my first aha moment, because I'd like to think that life has a series of ahas. And despite our defeat, I still had a huge passion to get to know more. So the next year I decided to participate not as a speaker, but as a coach. And I coached the university's team that year in 2018, and we made it to the World Finals. And this time we won the World Finals, and we were the first African team to do so in the 26th and now 28th or 29th year of its history. And it was such an open door for all of us. It just showed us and demonstrated that Africa certainly has a huge role to play, not only in the aerospace industry, but also in space law. And of course, from the networks I developed there, I just kept getting exposed to more and more opportunities to develop and grow. And I suppose I've had many seminal moments ever since then, but I think another aha moment, which is on the way now, is at this IAC, I get to come back full circle, not as a student, not as a coach, but as a young space leader, which is a recognition I will receive this year from the International Astronautical Federation. And to think all it started was by myself putting myself out there in a competition that at the time seemed so random, but has totally changed the trajectory of my career. I suppose that there's been a series of aha moments, but each one of them required a huge amount of faith and trust in the process, and trust in what I thought would come out of it. Yeah.
Yeah, you like truly embody inspiration. I think what you are showing is that you went beyond your comfort zone, and you kind of pushed yourself to find those opportunities. You were open to opportunities. You didn't close off any doors, and you're like, oh, this sounds cool. I'm gonna join. I'm gonna try. And you took it forward, and you went as a coach, and now you're being recognized. I mean, first off, congratulations on that achievement. I think it's so inspiring to hear young women like you doing such incredible things, because it inspires students like myself to kind of get out of my comfort zone and to kind of push myself and to keep going. And I so wish I could have been at IAC to see you in person this year. I learned about the conference too late, but next year I will hopefully see you in person. But I think it's just amazing what you're doing with what you're given, and how you're pushing and making opportunities accessible for other students from your own experiences. And I know so many students are being inspired by what you're doing every day. And I'm sure throughout this journey, you must have had challenges. You must have had, you were mentioning the imposter syndrome, maybe it's like a doubts or fears. I'm curious, did you have obstacles in your journey? And if so, how are you able to overcome these obstacles?
Well, let me start with the answer first, which is I've been able to overcome them by leveraging my networks and also just engaging more with my peers. But there are a number of challenges, of course, that I face not only as a young woman, as a young African woman, as a young Zimbabwean, and even as a space lawyer. And they mostly revolve around access, and mainly access to resources to support your career and development. So I mentioned, or I briefly alluded to, my having wanted to study space law at some point and not having had the means. And of course, my having had to do research and again, not having had the means as well, because we have all of these vast resources, but a great many of them are resource libraries that require you to have some significant contribution financially to access them. Journals are expensive, books are even more expensive, and not much accessible material is available online. So that was another challenge. A greater challenge that we don't often talk about is also the viability of thought leadership that comes from developing and emerging space nations, because it's perceived that perhaps we don't have the knowledge or the technological base to make certain deductions. So I also have struggled perhaps sometimes advancing my research, because undoubtedly there will be people who are skeptical about, the veracity of what I have to say and on what leg I'm standing on to be able to say so. And also being young, I think the same thing factors into that. You're obviously in a well-developed industry that has pre-existing experts. So finding your space in this big, expansive world is also quite difficult. And yeah, I think those would be the major challenges that I faced over the course of it. And like I said, I have a good group of friends and networks who always do their best to not only give me opportunities that I would otherwise not have, but also give me access to resources and just support me by letting me know about what's the latest opportunity, what's trending in space law, what can I contribute to. I recently had the opportunity to speak at the UN Committee on the Peaceful Uses of Outer Space, and I certainly wouldn't have done so without my colleagues at the Space Generation Advisory Council, who felt that this year they needed to hear from a young African. And that was so momentous for me. It was the first time that Zimbabwe had made a statement at the UN COPUOS, and for me, it just, it really helped to give me the motivation I needed to continue despite these obstacles. So once again, attaching myself to these organizations and also finding very good colleagues and friends in the industry has helped me just weather the storm a little bit, yeah.
That's incredible. That's wonderful advice. I will definitely second what you were saying about forming a community, forming those mentors or those friends who can support you towards like a common goal or mission you have. At SGAC or SEDS USA or SEDS Africa, SEDS Europe, there's so many different companies and organizations and nonprofits focused around empowering students. And I think SGAC is a really big one of that. And I'm so glad you were able to find that community, that network to support you, as well as kind of rely on, when you're going through something, those opportunities. SGAC provides wonderful scholarships for students. AIAA, they provide incredible scholarships. Actually, I applied for a few, so I can definitely, echo that it's so important to find that community who can support you, kind of get closer to your goals, and make sure you don't feel the imposter syndrome when you're surrounded with individuals like that. So that is definitely incredible advice and something that I will echo from my own experiences. I found mentors on LinkedIn who supported me more than ever. They were my, they were the ones who helped me take off this organization to another level and to reach more students and to get greater access to funding and grants. And so definitely I will echo what you were saying about that. And so now that we were able to learn a little bit more about your journey, I'm curious more about your insights of the aerospace sector. So from your experience so far, I know you still have a long way to go and so much more to continue to accomplish to inspire every student in Africa and really across the world. But before you get to those experiences, I'm curious from your position now as someone who's a recent space lawyer, what excites you and what makes you nervous for the future of the aerospace industry?
I suppose what excites me first and foremost is the potential for Africa to contribute to space development. And I say so understanding that space development follows a linear curve from research and development to technology and then to innovation. And you often wonder, where would an emerging or developing space nation fit into all of that? And I suppose that continents such as Africa have a huge role to play in research and development because we have such vast experience on our continent in different fields and sectors that can help us build a robust research and development base, even in outer space. And I'll give the example of the fellowship that I did at the Open Lunar Foundation. And my research was basically advancing an economic model for in situ space resource utilization on the moon. And how I was able to derive this economic model was by looking at Africa as the capital, the world's capital of mining, and using our rich experience as the extractive industry capital of the world to decide how we would deal with a multi-stakeholder expedition to not only the moon, but other celestial bodies where there is a resource to be benefited from. So to that end, I believe that every single continent has its rich cultural and diverse experience that they can lend to space sort of as an analogous regime to draw from. So I'm most excited to see how Africa will take its place, especially in terms of research and development. And once you have a strong base in R&D, it gives a perfect segue to technology and then to innovation and even what comes after that. But I suppose as we expect new players, the obvious challenge would be space sustainability. And this is a huge theme for us this year, especially as we lead up to World Space Week. Space sustainability is a grave challenge of our times, not only with regards to how we manage the environment of space as a resource, but also how we ensure that all stakeholders, which is all humankind, have equal opportunity to contribute to the solutions we find, not only for Earth, but also for maintaining space as well. So I really look forward to seeing how space governance will develop as an important point for space law and policy, and how we can create institutions and laws and policies and also develop professionals who can come up with these creative and new laws that will allow us to better manage outer space, especially when it comes to the environment. And of course, space debris comes to the fore when I think of that, and imagining that by the next few decades, we could have almost 10,000 new space objects in outer space. It's going to be quite crowded. Now, how we'll need to manage not only space debris, but also space traffic management and space situational awareness. All of these will go hand in hand from the technical side to also promoting cooperation with lawyers and finding how we can find that, sweet spot where everyone can benefit and it all stays safe. Yeah.
Yeah, I will definitely agree. I think trying to see the future is just imagining it is exciting. Just seeing the different countries that are going to be involved. There's so many different emerging countries that are having space organizations, such as there was a few that I was just hearing about in the Middle East. And just what's arising and what's growing in the space economy is exciting. In the next 10 years, we're predicted to be $1 trillion market. And I think just seeing this rapid growth and development of the space sector is something I'm looking forward to greatly. And also what you mentioned about the nervousness, especially the piece about space sustainability, is so critical as we're trying to explore beyond. It's so important, as you were mentioning, to think about that sustainability piece of how are we going to maintain continuous human presence in space, but also make sure we're protecting this beautiful place that we belong in. And what you mentioned about World Space Week is just a plug for everyone, is on October, during World Space Week, we're having, Ignited Thinkers is working with a company called the Heinz Family Foundation. And in Atlanta, Georgia, in Georgia Tech, we're hosting an event. And also in the AUC, Atlanta University Center, we're having a huge event for all students and families to come in, learn about space sustainability, talk with astronaut Stephanie Wilson, as well as other incredible space leaders, which I'm greatly looking forward to. But as you were mentioning, I think it's so important to keep both of these pieces together in mind. And so now that we're able to learn about your journey as well as what makes you excited for the future of this space sector, my last and final question for you. You've given plenty of advice throughout this interview, things that really touch me deep in the heart as a young girl who's trying to figure out my own career, but also for every student that's listening here today. What is one final piece of advice that you would like to share? Something that you wish you knew when you were in high school or entering college, trying to pursue a career in STEM, aerospace, really just any career. What is one piece of advice you wish you knew entering high school or college?
Oh, wow, I think I have a few. I think I can confidently say that failure is a good thing, because you can never really fail. It's just a redirection to your correct path. So allow yourself that opportunity to be redirected onto the path that you're supposed to be. And there will always be a lesson from it. It will always give you an opportunity to grow and adjust and modify yourself, and it will build strength of character. I think also what I can confidently say as well is that no matter how much you fail, it will never take away from that inherent destiny that's placed in each and every single one of us from the time we were born even. So I wish I could go back in time, because I probably would have stressed less. I've perhaps gone through more than my fair share of failures in life, but not a single one of them have placed a dent on what is meant to be in my life. And I've still ended up not only where I wanted to be, but even better than. And I could have saved myself a lot of anguish and a lot of turmoil if I had just trusted in the process. So whether you like it or not, if you're born for it, it will be yours. You just need to walk confidently in it already and allow yourself the space to grow. And don't be afraid to start small. They always say Rome wasn't built in a day, and it's so cliche, but that's the absolute truth. So you have to start somewhere, and it's better to start today, as soon as yesterday, as we like to say in Zimbabwe, and just give yourself all the time to grow, especially when you're young and you still have all of that energy. Do it now, and you'll thank yourself all those years later. But most importantly, just be strong and be ready to fight for it. And it's already yours anyway.
That is amazing, the way of thinking and thought process. I think instead of viewing failure as a setback or a drawback or something that's going to pull you behind, thinking of it as a redirection to a different way, I think that's so beautiful. And I think it'll help you have like continuous hope for the future. I think a lot of times when we do fail, whether it be on something simple for a student, it might be the biggest deal to fail an exam or to get a bad grade, or to really lose a job or to not get an internship you wanted. I think those can seem like the biggest failures in the world, but also viewing it as a experience to redirect and find a new opportunity could lead you in 100 times of a better position. And I think just trusting the process, I think sometimes you need to hear that. And thank you so much for sharing that and for saying that, because I think a lot of times we don't want to believe it, but I think hearing it from someone like yourself to know to trust the process is something that I will keep in heart, and I'm sure every student listening will as well. So thank you so much for taking your time to speak with us today. I can't even tell you how inspiring this was to me. I've interviewed so many space champions, and you're one of the youngest I've interviewed. And I think just hearing your journey so far and what you're doing to inspire students across the world, especially in areas where space industry might not necessarily have the best presence, I think is incredibly inspiring. And I'm looking forward to all that you'll continue to accomplish. And I'll be watching the virtual streaming of IAC as you accept your award. So thank you so much for all your time today.
No, thank you so much for having me. I'll never pass up an opportunity to spread awareness on just how impactful this career has been, not only for myself, but really for all humankind. And I really want to thank you for increasing access to young women's voices, access to African voices, access as well just to the general population who want to hear these stories and understand what's developing, because it's going to be hot topics. It's going to be a developing field that everyone will want to get involved in. So thank you so much for your work. It's such a pleasure to meet like-minded individuals and also young individuals in the industry who have a deep desire to contribute. And I mean, if we're talking sustainable development in space, we're looking at the continuity of aerospace, and we are the next generation. So we certainly deserve a seat at the table. And as equal co-contributors and also beneficiaries of space, it's great to have this platform. So thank you so much for the time as well.
Thank you. And I'm so excited for what our generation will accomplish in the space industry as we, celebrate what everyone has done before us, but also all that we can continue to accomplish in the next 20, 30, 40, 50 years. So thank you.